Mel Kiper updated his big board after the Senior Bowl and the Shrine Bowl before the NFL Combine. So I thought we could take a look at some of the prospects he had moving up and moving down since Atlanta's picking 15. So for the first time, they're not picking 8 in a while, which means Falcons fans need to broaden their knowledge on this prospect pool. Whereas last year, you really, and the year before that, and the year before that, and the year before that, you really only had to learn about the top 10 guys in the draft since you were picking top 10. But this year, it's not that simple. Top 10 players might not be there at 15. So I want you guys to be as well versed as possible. The number one player on Kiper's big board, he's definitely not falling to 15, is Travis Hunter. So we can just kind of start to cruise through these players because as much fun as it would be to see Abdul in Atlanta, that's not happening. Same for Mason Graham. No Shedeur Sanders, no Cam Ward. So we hit the express button here. Ashton Genty, no. T-Mac, the Arizona receiver, hot take. I don't think he's even really a round one guy. A little bit disappointing this past season in my eyes. So someone's going to take him probably top 20. And I get kind of like Mykel Williams vibes for the Chargers. Number 8. Let's pause right here. Jalon Walker. This is a player we have not talked about on the channel. The Georgia linebacker was 8 on Kiper's last big board, and he's 8 on his current big board. So let's get ourselves familiar with the 6'2", 245-pound linebacker. One, like pretty much every Georgia defender, he's extremely versatile. He's got good pass rush upside. If you want to make an NFL scout feel something, just say they have pass rush upside. That is the biggest buzz phrase to a scout, to a GM, because the name of the game right now is getting to the quarterback if you don't have a star quarterback. Now, a concern that's out there for Walker is this was his first true season as a starter. The previous 2 years in Athens, he was more of a third down edge rusher, which, hey, there's your pass rush upside. But this past year, first real season as an off-ball linebacker. So there's not a ton of tape out there, and if he does not succeed super well in the NFL, I think we can probably circle back to this was someone who was relatively unknown for being a top 10 prospect compared to, like, say, Roquan Smith. He was not a one-year starter, right, at Georgia. And when the Bears took him 8th overall, there was a lot of body of work surrounding Roquan. It's not the same for Walker. But there is a lot to like, and any Georgia fans watching right now, I invite you to go into the comment section and fill non-UGA fans in on what Jalon Walker is as a prospect. But if Atlanta comes to the conclusion of we've got too many injuries between Troy Anderson and Nate Landman, and we just think Jalon Walker is too good of a prospect to pass on, even though he's not a traditional edge rusher, we can get him and Caden Ellis in the middle. And those are two ferocious pass rushing inside linebackers. We can address edge rusher in round 2 or something. Next up on Kiper's big board, it is Will Johnson, the DB out of Michigan. I want to pause here and talk about Johnson for a moment because he is one of my favorite prospects in this draft class. Peter Schrager compared him to Patrick Surtain, who, by the time you are watching this, is probably the NFL Defensive Player of the Year. We're filming this video during our live show Thursday afternoon. Will Johnson, in my eyes, is as close as you can get to a surefire thing at the cornerback position. The only knock is he missed some time in 2024. He played 6 games. He battled a turf toe injury, which as a corner, that's a little bit of a concerning type of injury. You don't want that following you into the NFL, but you put the injury aside, you are getting a shutdown corner. And not just like a Revis Island corner, which I'm mad at myself for saying that because I don't want you guys to get the impression that he's the next Darrelle Revis. There will not be another Darrelle Revis, but he's got incredible ball skills. He had pick sixes for days in 2023 when Michigan won the Natty. Interceptions, pass breakups, lockdown, put him in man, put him in zone, put him wherever you want. He can help and run support. Will Johnson is a very well-rounded, and I want to say it, so I'm going to say it, bust-proof prospect. I'm that high on him. This is someone that in a few years when we're talking about the 2028 NFL draft, and you guys are wondering if I know anything about draft prospects, I'm going to reference how hype I was on Will Johnson as a prospect for evidence as to why you should believe me on this prospect pool. So if he were to fall to 15, I don't care how big of a need Atlanta needs at pass rusher. Go run the ticket in. Go pair Jesse Bates, Will Johnson, and AJ Terrell, and you will form a Bermuda Triangle of death. Someone come up with a funnier Atlanta-themed pun for a no-fly zone. All flights are grounded out of Hartsfield Jackson. Do your best in the comment section. Will Johnson is my favorite prospect for some level of possibility of falling to 15. So he's the guy that I would say Falcons fans should be praying is there. Not likely, but Leatu Latu was the first defender taken off the board last year at 15. No one saw that coming. Christian Gonzalez, the year before that, we were talking about Atlanta taking him at 8. He falls all the way to New England at 17. This is the NFL draft we're talking about. Expect the unexpected. Moving on here, Tyler Warren was at 10. At number 11, it's Will Campbell. No offensive line. I don't think, at least. I should probably actually do a little bit more offensive line research in case they want to replace Caleb McGarry. But for now, we'll skip over the offensive tackle position. Let's get off the train here at Shamir Stewart. He was 21 on Kiper's January big board. Fast forward to February, the guy is number 12. Why the big jump? He was a major benefactor from the Senior Bowl. It was on full display, his athleticism, his bend. Now, the Senior Bowl is really good for guys who I think don't go to a Power 5, Power 4 school. They don't play great competition, so people discount them. But when they get to the Senior Bowl and they play offensive tackles, defensive ends from all across the country, and they show, hey, I can go up against an Oregon, an Alabama, a Texas left tackle, just as well as a South Alabama or a James Madison left tackle. Those are players that can see their stock rise. Stewart just in front of every single GM, I believe. There was some buzz about Fontenot not being there. I never found any evidence that was true. So, whatever. My point on Stewart, though, is you saw his stats. And I'm going to start the rallying cry, right? No production, no interest. No production, no interest. If you can't get to the quarterback in college football in a one-on-one scenario, I don't have enough belief to wager the 15th overall pick that you can figure it out in the NFL. I'll wager the 65th overall pick if you're that athletic, but the 15th, no, can't do it. Can't do it. I'm not budging. Colston Loveland up next. No tight end, although I guess if they trade Kyle Pitts, we could talk about it, but let's cross that bridge if we get there. Kelvin Banks, Texas left tackle. Between you and me, not super high on him as a prospect for being top 10. Mykel Williams. We've talked about the Georgia Bulldog before, but let's kind of refresh everyone's memories and, re-hit this player because he definitely could be the pick for the Falcons at 15. So we can't spend enough time on guys who are in that range and at that position of need. Last year for UGA, only 5 sacks. That was the number that scouts and teams were hoping that would go up. You can see how in 2023, the guy had 4.5 sacks. Okay, so putting together a good sophomore campaign, breakout junior season, kind of not really. Now, in his defense, he did miss time with an ankle injury, and towards the end of the year in the SEC championship game, he put up, I think, 2 sacks, was it, against Texas? So he looks and sounds like a player that will dominate the NFL combine. I won't go as far to say he'll have like a Jalon Walker combine where he goes from being a first-round guy to the first overall pick, but Kirby Smart and this Georgia football team just has a knack for seeing their guys skyrocket coming out of the combine when everyone's in their underwear and it's not about, true football with the pads on. It's just athletic testing. And when those scouts and GMs are seeing these guys in person and they're seeing how big and massive and fast they are, that's a tough thing for them to shake mentally. And Williams, to me, seems like someone who 3-4 weeks from now is going to be talked as one of the big winners coming out of Indianapolis. Before we get on to the rest of today's big board from Mel Kiper, quick shout out to Prize Picks. Prize Picks is the best place to get real money sports action. With over 10 million members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings, Prize Picks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You just pick more or less on at least 2 player stat projections. Prize Picks puts their members first, so all withdrawals are fast, safe, and secure. When my picks hit, I can get my money in as quick as 15 minutes. They also offer Venmo and MasterCard for quick and easy deposits and withdrawals into your account. So download the app today and use code CLNS to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Plus, it's not too late before the big game to download the app and take the more on Patrick Mahomes' passing yards, which they put at 0.5. Download the app today and use code CLNS to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks. Run your game. On to number 16 on Kiper's big board. It is Josh Simmons, the Ohio State left tackle. We'll move along here to 17, where we find our friend Mike Green. Shout out to Mike Green. He was not even in the top 25 of Kiper's first big board, and now he is all the way up to 17 after a dominant performance at the Senior Bowl, where he did not even finish off the week. He had shown enough the first few days where scouts felt like, yep, he is living up to the hype. He is looking like someone who led the country in sacks this past season. It's also just a really cool story. Starts off at Virginia, transfers to Marshall, doesn't even start 2023, and in his lone season as a starter, he becomes almost a lock for the first round. 23 tackles for loss, 17 sacks, 59 pressures, 81 tackles. I think the combine is going to be crucial for Mike Green. I think we all have no doubt the production speaks for itself, but he's a little bit on the slender side. So I don't think he'd be a necessarily great fit in a 4-3 defense as a defensive end. Willing to be proven wrong, but to me, he projects best in a 3-4 defense as an outside linebacker. But then there are some questions about, can he really step back in coverage? My concern is teams will look at him and go, everything's looking good, and he's a great football player, but we're not quite sure what role he'll be. Like, if he's a 4-3 defensive end, is he big enough to go up against offensive tackles in a 3-point stance? If he's a 3-4 outside linebacker, is he good enough in coverage? We didn't see that out of him in Marshall. So those are questions that teams are going to have to answer. Luther Burden from Mizzou is next up. He's a yards after catch monster for the Tigers after a bit of a disappointing-ish final season in Columbia. Another player that was not ranked in Kiper's previous big board, Elijah Arroyo. He hopped up all the way to 19. Malachi Starks, another Georgia Bulldog, cracking the top 25, followed by South Carolina's safety, Nick Emanwari. I like both these safeties a lot. Emanwari might be my favorite. Sorry, Georgia fans. He kind of reminds me of like Derwin James. Built like a linebacker, moves like a safety. Emeka Egbuka from Ohio State climbs in at 22. I don't think anyone expects Atlanta to go wide receiver, so we can proceed. Tyler Booker, I think he's going to be a really good guard, but Atlanta does not need a guard. Jahad Campbell, Alabama's off-ball linebacker, kind of their version, if you will, of a Jalon Walker. I'm not quite sure why these two players are so far apart on the big board. Campbell last year for the Crimson Tide, 117 tackles, 12 tackles for loss, 5 sacks, 20 pressures, 2 forced fumbles, 1 interception. Can someone fill me in on why Campbell is so much further behind than Walker? I'm sure the answer is quickly going to be, one's have got physical traits unlike any other, but you don't play football at the combine. You play with pads on. And Campbell last year for Alabama did one hell of a job. In his first true season as like a starter from start to end, that's not a ton of tape. And I don't think it's a bad idea for him to enter the draft after having a season like that when he projects to be a first to second round draft pick. But once again, if Atlanta has concerns over Anderson and Landman long term, and they think we can find a good pass rusher in round 2, but we can't find a good off ball linebacker in round 2, then Campbell or Walker could be a sleeper pick, which we learned last year to not assume anything, myself included. Dallas Turner, you are not a Falcon. So yeah, that's one linebacker to keep an eye on. 25th and final player on Kiper's big board. It's Walter Nolan. I like Walter Nolan a lot as a prospect. I think there are, I don't want to say Chris Jones vibes because that's a really high bar to hold someone to, but the pass rush upside of Chris Jones I see in Walter Nolan. His last season for Ole Miss, a bunch of sacks, 14 tackles for loss, 48 tackles, 35 pressures, and he's pushing 300 pounds. So Chris Jones, who's one of the best interior defensive linemen when it comes to generating quarterback. I don't want to say Nolan's that guy because, again, that's just a really high bar, but I think there's a lot to like about Walter Nolan. Both of them came out of the state of Mississippi, so maybe there's a correlation there. If you made it all the way to the end of the video, drop an ATL in the comments section below. I love the end of the video crew. I really cannot thank you enough for supporting this channel and watching from start to finish. So if you're still watching, I would love to give you a shout out. Drop an ATL down below.